nothing that screamed killer. Neighbors described him as quiet. The kind of man who mowed his lawn on Saturdays and nodded politely but never invited conversation. He worked at a local warehouse, paid his bills on time. To the world, David was invisible, ordinary. But ordinary men don't drive around with bodies in their trunks. Detectives searched his home, a modest two-bedroom house at the edge of town. What they found inside deepened the mystery. Inside the house was spotless. Too spotless. Counters wiped clean. No dishes, no clutter. Walls bare except for a single calendar hanging in the kitchen. But what was on that calendar turned stomachs cold. Dates, circled in red. Random days across the past year. No notes, no reminders, just red rings. And when investigators cross-referenced those dates, many of them matched reports of missing persons from nearby towns. In the basement, they found something worse. A workbench lined with tools, not unusual in itself until they noticed the stains. Dark blotches on the wood. A saw with what looked like dried blood crusted near the blade. Plastic sheeting rolled up in a corner. Industrial-strength garbage bags identical to the ones pulled from the trunk. And on a shelf, neatly arranged, were driver's licenses. 7 of them, each belonging to someone reported missing. Each one now a silent testimony against the man who had collected them. The media storm. News spread fast. By the next morning, headlines screamed across the state. Bodies found in car trunk after routine stop. Community shocked by gruesome discovery. Who is David Marlowe? Reporters camped outside the sheriff's office. Cameras flashed. Microphones shoved forward. Everyone wanted answers. How many victims were there? How long had this been going on? And how could someone so ordinary hide something so monstrous? For the community, fear settled like a fog. People who once waved to David on his way to work now wondered how close they had come to becoming one of those dates circled in red. Parents held their children tighter. Neighbors locked doors earlier. Trust evaporated overnight. Back to the interrogation. Detectives returned to the room, armed with what they had found. The licenses, the calendar, the blood-stained tools. They pushed them across the table toward David. Alvarez leaned in, his voice sharper now. These people, they had families, they had lives. You kept their licenses like trophies. Why, David? Why them? David's eyes flicked down, then back up. For the first time, he smiled. Just a thin, chilling curve of the lips. They were chosen. Jennings slammed a hand on the table. Chosen for what? David leaned back in his chair, his calm unshaken. To disappear. Someone had to do it. The psychological games. Interrogators brought in psychologists, hoping to break through. They studied his tone, his posture, his choice of words. What they found was disturbing. David didn't fit the mold of a panicked criminal. He wasn't remorseful. He wasn't defensive. He was controlled, calculated. And he seemed to believe, truly believe, that what he had done was justified. Experts later called it a textbook example of a sociopath masking himself within society. Invisible, unremarkable, until the mask slipped. Community in shock. Meanwhile, families of the missing gathered, desperate for answers. Each new piece of evidence connected David to another name, another face, another life cut short. Vigils were held in church parking lots. Candles flickered in the night. Pictures of smiling faces taped to poster boards. For them, the case wasn't about headlines or police strategy. It was about closure. About finding out if their loved one was among the black bags lined up under a tent at the county morgue. The silent prisoner. Days turned into weeks, but David Marlowe never gave a full confession. He answered questions in fragments, riddles, and chilling one-liners. He never once asked for a lawyer, never once asked how much time he might face. To some, it seemed he wanted to be caught. To others, it felt like he was still holding secrets, dangling them like bait, feeding off the attention. And as investigators dug deeper, one thing became clear. The bodies in the trunk were just the beginning. Because in the shadows of David's quiet life were trails of evidence that suggested he had been at this for years. Long before the traffic stop, long before Officer Cole flipped on his lights, the man in the red polo wasn't just carrying bodies, he was carrying the weight of a hidden history. A history that investigators were now determined to uncover, piece by piece. The investigation unfolds. Secrets, evidence, and chilling discoveries. The hours that followed the grisly traffic stop were nothing short of chaotic. Police cruisers lined the stretch of road where the black sedan had been pulled over. Flashing red and blue lights painted the night sky, creating an eerie strobe effect across the trees and nearby houses. What had started as a routine stop for a minor violation had now become one of the most disturbing crime scenes in recent memory. The suspect, still in cuffs, sat silently on the curb, his face pale under the harsh beams of the patrol car's headlights. He avoided eye contact, his jaw tight, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Detectives who had been called to the scene circled around him, trying to gauge his composure. "Does he look nervous to you?" one officer whispered. Another shook his head. "He doesn't look nervous. He looks cold." The open trunk was now sealed off with yellow crime scene tape. Forensic units were already at work, photographing every angle, carefully removing the black trash bags that contained the horrific discovery. As each bag was unsealed, the scene grew darker, heavier. The bodies, 2 women and 1 man, were identified as young adults, their lives brutally cut short. The first breakthrough. Back at headquarters, the evidence started piling up. Investigators ran the suspect's license and registration. His name, Daniel Cross, a 38-year-old warehouse worker with no prior record, no outstanding warrants, no history of violence. On paper, he looked like an ordinary man. But the bodies told a different story. Detectives scoured his vehicle inch by inch. In the glove compartment, they found a crumpled notebook filled with strange entries, addresses, times, and what looked like coded notes. Some pages had chilling phrases scribbled hastily. "She won't stop screaming. Tie tighter." No mistakes this time. The forensics team discovered fibers on the duct tape used to bind the victims, fibers that matched rope found in the trunk. A crowbar with faint traces of blood was tucked beneath the spare tire compartment. Everything pointed to careful, deliberate acts of violence. But the question remained. Why? The interrogation begins. Daniel Cross was brought into the interrogation room, his wrists still shackled. The room was small, sterile, with a single table and 2 chairs. A camera blinked silently in the corner. Detective Ramirez sat across from him, dropping the crumpled notebook on the table with a loud thud. "Daniel, we stopped you for a broken taillight. That's it. A simple violation. But now, here we are. You know what we found in your trunk." Daniel didn't flinch. His eyes stayed fixed on the wall behind Ramirez. 3 bodies, the detective continued. 2 women, 1 man, all young, all dead. And you were driving around with them in your trunk. So help me understand, how does a warehouse worker with no criminal record end up here? At first, Daniel remained silent. Minutes stretched. The hum of the fluorescent light above was the only sound in the room. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, almost calculated. "They weren't supposed to be there." Ramirez leaned in. "What do you mean they weren't supposed to be there? You put them there." Daniel gave a twisted half-smile. "You don't understand. They were chosen." The detective's pen froze mid-note. "Chosen? By who?" Daniel tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "By me. By someone else. Doesn't matter. They're gone now." The words chilled the room. Ramirez knew he was facing not just a criminal, but a man whose mind operated in darkness, unraveling his past. As the interrogation stalled, investigators dug deeper into Daniel's life. Neighbors described him as quiet, polite, and unassuming. He kept to himself, rarely socialized, and often worked late shifts. But there were red flags no one had paid attention to. A former co-worker recalled how Daniel sometimes muttered strange things under his breath, phrases about control and obedience. Another remembered an incident where he became enraged over something trivial, his calm exterior shattering in seconds. Detectives searched his small apartment. Inside, they found more disturbing evidence. A locked trunk under his bed filled with zip ties, gloves, duct tape, and old photographs of unidentified women. Some photos had red X's marked across their faces, and in a hidden drawer, they found a flash drive. On it were chilling videos, grainy footage of Daniel following strangers late at night, recording them from a distance. Some of those strangers matched the victims in his car. The case was no longer about a traffic stop gone wrong. This was the work of a predator who had been stalking his victims for months, maybe years. Public outrage,